let's have not, an overview, let's say, about what are you seeing this year. Your job, in a way, is looking around and see what's happening and see what trends and undercurrents are moving people and moving the economy and moving brands and companies. And what are you? We have almost the half of the year. What are you seeing that is interesting, that's got your attention? And if you are trying starting to see some trends and things happening that are interesting or are taking some kind of form, or or having an influence, or whatever.
Yeah, so a large part of my job, as you know, is trying to understand people's behaviors. What's happening in terms of um, what people are doing, why they're doing this, why they're adopting certain things, why they're interested in something. And in order to learn about people, their way of thinking, and their habits, we are also able to understand how it influences culture, how it then can influence brands and industries, and the markets, and think about the long-term consequences of all of this. And I would say for this year particularly, what we are noticing is how people have been having a very difficult and wary time in the last 2 years. So I think the pandemic has been particularly tough for a lot of people, and it was a global impact. And that's quite interesting for us from a trend forecasting perspective, because it's very rare that one thing can impact the entire world and influence the entire world. So one of the big shifts as a result of that we've noticed is how people are rethinking what is important to them in life, and actually reprioritizing certain things. And this can then impact the travel sector, retail. How are people spending, for example? Are they actually thinking more about the future and wanting to save, or are they actually saying, no, we've been saving for the past 2 years because we were unable to go out, and now we want to spend big, but we want to spend big on certain things. So these are key elements that we consider and think about. So just reverting back to this year, where people are at, they've been quite wary, but they're far more considerate and thoughtful, and therefore they are thinking about how to live a more meaningful, sustainable, and optimistic and positive life. These are key elements that are driving them. In addition to this, as all of this is happening, they also so far more connected to technology than ever before, because they relied on technology a lot for work, for connection, for dating, whatever it might be, during the pandemic and during lockdown. So technology has really risen and kind of opened up a whole new chapter of what the digital era can look like for us. So that's, again, very, very exciting. And again, all of these different elements are influencing what it means for brands and what it means for industries, and how that's shaping and changing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, from what you say, what will deduce that actually people has changed because of the pandemics and all the influence and all the the hardship that it brought all over the world, has really changed the way of thinking, the way of acting, the way of spending, the way of almost of many things. On the contrary, there is a skeptic about that. That people that say that it hasn't changed anything. So you think that actually the pandemic has brought change in the way we live?
I think there's always a counter argument for everything. But yes, if we haven't learned from the pandemic, I think that's something to be concerned about. So definitely, I do think the pandemic has introduced, hopefully, positive change. And I think a lot of people have learned and taken meaning away from the last 2 years. So there may be a moment where people bounce back very momentarily to how things were, like the norm of, yes, wanting to eat out a lot or go out a lot. But what I look at is long-term impact. So I see there has been, in the short 2 years, the way we've operated, the way we're thinking, the way we're working has really impacted our long-term way of living and way of thinking. So even the way we think about health and wellness, that's changed a lot, and how we want to dedicate more time and space to these areas in our life. I think people, again, looking at the balance of life, people are reassessing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are going through, let's call it a seismic era or time when, apart from the pandemics, there are now people is coping with inflation problems in their daily life. There's problems with the supply chain, which perhaps is a macro thing, but it also has influence in our day-to-day activities. And of course, there's the war. There's war in Europe, which is a tragic and novel occurrence. All this paints a not so bright landscape. And how is this weighing on people attitudes and people ways of living and people a state of and people's spirits?
Yeah, so I definitely think people have, well, let me just step back for a second. All the global events that are happening, the fact that we are able to access this information, and what's different with the war that's happening between Ukraine and Russia right now, unlike any other war, is that we feel like we are on the ground. We're able to get information from a first person perspective through social media. So it's happening immediately in real time. It's happening in a way where it feels like we are there with them. So it feels closer to us than any other war we've experienced. And that's why people have such a close connection and showing a lot of empathy towards this war. Equally, whilst this is happening, similar to what happened during the pandemic, we showed an overwhelming positive response in terms of how people are able to get together and help in whatever way they can. So I think there's something quite moving in terms of how we work as a community and society, how we are able to really be there for others. And we do that by banding together and by being on the side that we think is going to be right in terms of ethics and values. So these are the key elements that we're thinking about, especially when it comes to spotting consumer and people's behaviors and change. This sense of togetherness and wanting to work together as a society, and how it brings people basic values at its core together. So you're almost setting aside the overarching disparity when it comes to race, gender, income inequality. So we're setting all of those aside and saying we are all aligning on this one issue, and let's get together and do what we can. So I think in times of negative things happening, we are also seeing the sort of positive side of humanity coming out. So there is that sort of balance that we're noticing, and just this very basic core human nature that comes out at these difficult times that we are seeing time and again. So again, during the pandemic, and of course there are going to be these groups who are quite the opposite, but the overarching conversation, overarching themes that we are seeing is that people are banding together.
Okay, let's go on. Well, you are the director of Wunderman Thompson Intelligence. And according to the Wunderman Thompson website, and let me quote, intelligence is an in-house futures and innovation think tank to help clients build long-term strategies based on qualitative and quantitative insight that incorporates cultural and behavioral change, sector innovation, and zeitgeist shift. Okay, that's fine, and it's quite interesting. And that's the theory. That's what it states that you do. But I would like you to talk a little bit about the actual work. What's the day-to-day activities? How the unit is organized? Do you have a team? What puts you in motion? When do you start to work on something, or how things go on in a day-to-day basis?
So for us, it's very important to be aware of current affairs, what's happening in the news, and any interesting new launches, releases, any new activations, any new technologies that's coming out, any key announcements that could be interesting with someone leaving or joining a company, a large company, how that can shape any influence. So understanding all of these topics and also being aware of any new social change. These are interesting elements for us because it can impact the way people behave and the way people think. So anything that connects to that is something that we want to be aware of. So if there's a new, for example, a new vegan chain doing something quite interesting, we want to understand where they're opening, why. Is it because there are more vegans there, or people believe in a certain type of way of living? So these are types of questions we start thinking about. And again, when it comes to more global impacts, that doesn't seem like it would connect with a company that works with brands. So, for example, even the war between Ukraine and Russia, us understanding how that can influence brands and their brand positionings. In addition, brand standing is one of the big themes and topics we've been talking about over the years in different shapes and forms. So where should a brand stand in light of a war like this? What statement are they making? How can this influence the way people's relationships with this brand be by certain things that they're doing, whether they're pulling out of Russia, whether they are continuing their relationship, whether they are actually actively saying something. These are areas that are important to us, and we also want to be vocal and ahead when it comes to helping influence our brands and giving them a perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you've been talking about the war and about the stance that brands have taken in front of it. Do you think that generally that they have done it okay? That they've been right in the movements and decisions that they've taken towards the respect of the war?
So this is getting quite political, but this is perhaps like not.
No, let's not move beyond the marketing or the brand image, yes. The brand image field, if you want. Okay, now I don't want you to talk politics unless you want that. Of course, you're free.
Yeah. Okay. So I think from a brand perspective, and again, this is why it's important for us to know where people stand and what's interesting for. Let me rephrase. This is why it's interesting for us to learn about where people are at, what they're thinking, who they side with, what they think is right and what they think is wrong. And at the moment, where people stand is they think that they want to stand with Ukraine and what's happening there. And therefore, it helps us with this knowledge and understanding, and obviously the nuances of what's happening politically, help inform brands with, this is where people are at, this is what they're thinking. You ultimately make the decision, but we advise this. So even us as WPP, we've actually pulled out of our own personal operations within Russia. And we've actually helped a lot of our staff, offering them additional month's salary, but also relocation as well. So as a company, we are personally doing quite a lot. And we want to, through our own actions, also help influence the clients that we work with to show what they can do as well. So that helps us inform brands of what to do and where to go and how much they should do as well. So they could do as much or as little as they want to, And perhaps they don't even need to really say or make a big announcement. They might just want to do it behind the scenes. So yeah, there's different ways of going about it.
Okay. And do you have let's talk about how do you organize? Do you have people all over the world being part of your team and looking for things, and you have the information centralized in some way? That's the way you work?
Yeah, so Wunderman Thompson, we have offices around the world, which is fantastic and very helpful for us. So we have strategists on the ground in different local areas who are able to help inform us of any interesting new things that are happening, any interesting local shifts. As a team, Wunderman Thompson Intelligence, we have a base in New York, London, and Kuala Lumpur. So that's exclusive to Wunderman Thompson Intelligence. And so we're always trying to think what's happening in as globally as we want to, but also looking at where trends are happening in an aspirational way. So there are certain markets that get a lot more coverage than most. So we do get asked a lot about that. It's like, hey, why are you not covering this region? But it's quite often we are chasing where the aspirational and the more future focus change and trends are happening. And therefore, there are certain markets that have people based there who are more willing to try out new things. And as they try out these new things, we're able to get a sense and, really have our finger on the pulse with understanding whether these new things that are happening is going to be just for a moment, or will it last, or how will it evolve if it does last? So we're able to unpack all of that.
And there's a kind of ranking of trendsetters of regions of the world that are let's say, putting more trends in motion now more than others. There's the USA, there's China, there's Korea, there's whatever.
Yes, so there are certain areas. So perhaps I can talk about this in the context of a recent report that we released called Into the Metaverse. And when we covered what's happening in the world of the metaverse, key countries did crop up, and that was the US, China, and actually South Korea. You're right, there was a lot happening there, but also there was a lot happening around Europe too. So across Europe, there was lots of different innovation hubs happening. So it's not exclusive to one place, but it might be the theme of the topic that we're talking about. And there may just be a lot more happening in certain places. And again, what happens in the West may be very different from what happens in the East. And of course, you can drill into the nuances of every country and every big city and small cities. So you can go into those details, but there's a reason why we focus on certain countries more than others. It's just people are more willing to take on new challenges and try new things out.
Okay. Well, perhaps the most visible of products of your work is the futures report that you make, that Intelligence makes every year, which is quite famous. Well, what's its impact? What's the feedback you have, or what means for your unit to do this, and what returns it brings to you personally and professionally?
So the Future 100 report is a report that we work on every year. It's actually quite fun. Our team really enjoys working on it. And this is where we unpack 100 different trends to look out for in the year ahead. So that's 100 micro trends, so mini trends that we think will be relevant in different industries, that will offer either inspiration, opportunity, or challenges to different companies as they flick through the report. So, of course, there's 100 trends. We're not expecting everyone to read all 100 of them, but there might be some that are more interesting than others and directly impact you as an individual or you as a company and brand than such. And as we work on this, so we separate each of the trends by different industries. So it ranges from technology to retail to luxury to health and to beauty and so on and so forth. So these sectors is just an easy way for us to help separate each of these trends. So there's 10 trends per category, and it's again a great way for any company to navigate it, because they might go straight to their industry and say, hey, this is what I want to focus on. But something I say all the time is look at adjacent categories. One thing we do as Wunderman Thompson Intelligence is we promote lateral thinking. So don't think in a way that's just about your industry, your brand, your competitors. Think beyond that, because there's so much crossover, especially between a lot of sectors. And we're able to see that by putting this Future 100 together. So when I present the Future 100, I don't present it in the same way as you see the report. I actually think about it in terms of macro trends. So what are the macro themes that we have identified that's crossing over between all these different types of industries, and therefore threading a theme between all these different trends. So that's generally how we think about it. But the Future 100 is just an easy way for people to be able to digest what is happening in the year ahead. And again, it's something that we want to ask people to use throughout the year. So it's not just something for the beginning of the year. It's something they can go back to whenever they need a bit of inspiration.
Again, it gets used. Do you have good feedback about it?
Yeah, we get a lot of downloads. So we get a lot of people who download it, a lot of people who comment and say they use it, and they're already internally we're presenting it to clients as well. So there seems to be a lot of use throughout the year and across different clientele with this, and even people from different agencies quite often say they look forward to the release of it as well.
Okay, that's good. Well, 100 trends is a lot of trends, but maybe you have 2 or 3 that are your pet ones, the ones you like it particularly, or do you like them to be true, or that are you seeing becoming a reality? What? Tell me about some of them that you particularly like.
So, I mean, 100 trends is a lot. So I would agree that it might help to hone in on a few. So I would say an overarching macro trend is not surprising, but the metaverse is something key that we are looking out for this year. So perhaps building the metaverse is, that's trend number 1. So that's one of the key trends that I want to highlight in terms of what I think is important to look out for in this year ahead, because right now we're in the very early stages of what the metaverse is, where it can be heading. And if we're able to ask different companies and brands and individuals to come together to help build the foundation, the core foundation of the metaverse right now, that would be a very exciting time. And just to be able to participate in it in that way, that would be great. So that's one trend. Another one, maybe I will find one that's a little bit more fun, is pivoting slightly, is we have been focusing on our health and well-being in different ways for a very long time. And in 2016, I think we released a report called The Well Economy, and how there was just been a lot of money and thought and energy being poured into the wellness economy. And now the pandemic again has changed the way we think about health. So in 2020, we thought about health in a very physical way. How does COVID-19 impact us physically? What does it mean to us physically? In 2021, the continuation of COVID-19 and its restrictions and its health concerns was a huge impact on our mental health. And so we were focusing a lot on what this means for us mentally. How is this impacting us? How long will this last? And for this year, we started to drill into the nuances of mental health and started looking at emotional health. So trend number 90 is emotional health, and how we're starting to see more physical spaces dedicating time, design, and a place for people just to find this respite to focus on their emotional health, because perhaps not everyone suffers from mental health, but everyone is connected to emotional health. So how can you spend more time focusing on that? And that's another trend. And then I guess another one I wanted to mention is Chief Impact Officers, which is trend number 92. And this will be the last one I mention. So Chief Impact Officers is looking at how we want to make regeneration and sustainability a priority for all of our businesses. And we want to do that by thinking about the new types of hires we want within the company and how they can actually make impact beyond sustainability. Because when we think about sustainability and regeneration, we're also thinking about how it can offer more value, ethics, morals, and be more equitable for the brand as well. So it expands into a vaster array of thinking. So I think employing someone or thinking about new types of employment structures is going to be key in implementing this, because now a brand's role has really changed and evolved. A brand's role goes beyond just marketing and selling their products and what they do. They have a responsibility when it comes to talking about what they stand for, human rights, morals, issues, values, how they can impact the planet and the earth. So all these different elements are now a brand's responsibility as well. So no big deal, brands, just a little bit more extra work that you have to do. But these are things that people expect and want from them now.
Okay. Now we will go back to the metaverse in a moment, but let's keep for a little while with the trends report. There's a lot of them. You do the one you do is very famous and has a lot of history, but there are many of them. At the beginning of the year, there's kind of a storm of trends reports. Is there a danger of they becoming kind of irrelevant, or the trees not letting us see the forest, or this kind of inflation of trends?
So we don't actually release too many trend reports per year. Last year we released the Future 100, which is our annual flagship, and then 2 macro reports. So one on regeneration and one on into the metaverse. And then we also had a local APAC report, which focused on retail. So really 4 reports, macro reports in total. And they never become irrelevant. We would often say they evolve. So as we release this macro report, all the data and research is still useful, because we're obviously narrating and thinking about things from a long-term perspective. But obviously what we're observing is what's happening right now. So there might be things happening in a year or two's time, but the long-term trends that we cover in it are still relevant. And I would say we are constantly trend checking. So checking if these trends are relevant, what's happening. Maybe some of the companies that we've written about have evolved and changed, or maybe they have actually gone bust and they don't exist anymore. But that's not the relevant side for us. The relevant side is actually looking at where people are at, the consumer perspective, the people perspective. Do they still have appetite for everything that we covered and talked about? Are these trends still relevant to people and where they're heading? So these are the types of themes and things that we're looking at. So I often say, when people say, how can you tell if something is going to be long lasting or not? For us, predicting people's behaviors, there's more of a pattern to that. So it's easier for me to predict what's going to happen when it comes to 5 years' time or 10 years' time, when it comes to a person's needs and what they will have appetite for. But I won't be able to predict, the next technology in 5 to 10 years' time, because who knows what's going to be in that space. I can kind of make an intuitive guess, but someone might invent something completely groundbreaking, and I would not be able to guess that. Otherwise, I'd be working in technology. So, this is why it's core and very important for us to focus on the humans, the people, and the human insight is the core thing that drives all of our trends.
Okay. Now, when I was talking before, or when I posed the question about the inflation of trends reports, I was not talking about WT specifically, but there's a lot of them. Every company makes one, and we as journalists, for example, at the beginning of the year, were inundated with trends reports. So there are too many of them, and maybe the thing one. Many of them would get lost in that multitude of options. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah. So I mean, that's again probably hard for me to comment on, like the mass of trend reports and coverage out there. There's just a lot of content in the world today, and in that respect, it's important that people know how to sieve out what's works for them. And I think we are going to be creating probably a lot more content in the future. And if that is the case, it's hoping that we will be creating content that is relevant. And but the more content we have, the more information out there, it just offers people more outlets to choose from. So it's definitely not a terrible thing, but it's important to know how to cut through the noise, I guess.
Okay. Well, who do you spend more time with the clients or with the people of your colleagues in the agency?
Yeah, so quite mixed. My role is pretty much maybe 60% internal and 40% client facing. And so a lot is, even when I'm working internally, it might be how does this information ladder up to the client. So quite often I would be presenting or workshopping with clients and working with them in that respect. And with colleagues, so within my team, for us, it's all about ideation, where things are going. Let's brainstorm what you're observing, what I'm seeing. Let's try and bring these things together. And when it comes to the wider network of Wunderman Thompson, so working with strategists, account leads or creatives, it is about, again, how do we wrap all of this information that we have and content and make it translatable for this particular client that we're working with or this particular industry that they're in. How do we turn this information into something that's bespoke for them? So what we put out into the world is pretty open, how people want to use it. But then we would use all that knowledge and observation and analysis and make that specific and bespoke for brands.
And do your colleagues at the agency, let's say planners or creatives or whatever, they ask you proactively, they say, Emma, can you help us with this or that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So I would do a lot of internal presentations, and from these, global forums or global talks internally, people will then think about their client and think about, the content that I've just presented and connect it back. And then they would just email and connect with me to see if they can work, we can work together, or if there's any relevance. So quite often it will start off with a brainstorm. Or nowadays it's more like, can you just present to the client exactly what you presented there? So yeah, we're a very small team. So the way we work is very, it's not so formal, which is quite nice. And I think, that leads to a closer way of working too.
Okay. What about clients? Tell me about what they are asking you at the moment? What they need you for now? Why they need the intelligence that you provide, or what do you want from it? What they need? What are they worried about that?
Yeah, so Wunderman Thompson Intelligence, what we're able to provide is a wider view of what's happening in the world right now, and where we think this is all heading. And quite often, a lot of clients think in a way that's very specific to their industry, and they don't have the sort of broader view. So we're able to come in and offer that bigger picture of what's happening in this world. We also look at different consumer groups, so different generations, and a lot of clients are also thinking about the younger generation. How can they connect with the younger generation? What type of language, what type of marketing, what types of platforms and channels will be relevant to this younger generation? So these are areas where we're able to facilitate and help. And because we have the broader overview, we're also able to say, yes, you might be in the beauty industry. Health and well-being is very close and adjacent to it. We have knowledge in that. Food and drink is actually quite close to beauty as well. So we can offer knowledge in this space too. And of course, retail is something that is relevant to pretty much all brands. So we're able to connect all of these different industries and put them together into something that's relevant for this specific client. So again, offering a broader knowledge that can then be funneled down into something more specific to the client is where we're able to offer help. And different trend reports that we release. So last year we released a report on regeneration and also one on the metaverse. So we have these deep dive macro reports that focus on these specific topics, which again, it maybe sound like it's just one subject matter, but it touches a lot across a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're able to provide them more information about that. And we're able to be there first to help them cover and think about things that they may not have thought about. So again, providing them that broader view, lateral thinking, as I always say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have mentioned young people. Are they, since the aftermath of the Second World War, youth has been very important in popular culture, more so than ever, and it has created a series of trends and fashions and new cultural movements and so on. Are they still so important? And are young people still the main generators of new trends, of new cultural ways and new cultural movements?
Absolutely. So young people are absolutely driving a lot of new trends and change out there. They're not exclusively the ones driving it because they're not earning and they're not making money in the same way that the older generations are, but their influence is definitely felt and we're aware of that. So Generation Z are the perfect example to focus on. So we've been monitoring them since 2015 when they were in their teenage years. The younger ones still are, but the older Generation Zs are already part of the working force. Mm-hmm. So they're already in their mid-20s. Mm-hmm. And in just those few years, they've made a huge impact in terms of the demand they want when it comes to types of employment they want to join, what rights they want to have, how the pandemic has affected them and the choices of work, how the pandemic has affected them and the choices of brands they want to be buying into. So, mm-hmm. And they've also been very pivotal when it comes to consumer loyalty. So when perhaps the older generations, there are certain models of loyalty that can capture their attention and they will sign up because they get points and rewards and it's great. The younger generation don't necessarily go by the same rules and they have a slightly different rule book. For them, it's more about what's interesting to them, what are their peers interested in, does it align with their values, does it align with their lifestyle and their way of thinking. and do they want to be paired with this brand for this reason? And as quickly as they are to adopt a brand, they're also as quick to drop a brand as well. So how can you continue that conversation and that resonance and that engagement with this generation? It's a lot harder. So this is where we come in, when it's important for us to constantly monitor where they're at, how things are impacting them. So again, we released a big report in 2015 on Generation Z. And when the pandemic hit, it was important for us to, again, see how the pandemic has affected them. And it really has. There has been a lot of new ways of thinking, and a lot of expectation when it comes to brands as well. So they are demanding even more from brands, as for that generation, that brands should be making change when it comes to, or stepping up when it comes to helping with COVID-19 and helping in this area. They should be focusing on wanting to heal not only individuals and their clients and their employees, but also society, and the sort of thinking of the broader view, but also to protect the people on this planet. So expectation from the younger generation is a lot higher. It's not just about, are you creating a good product that's beneficial to me? It goes beyond that. And now we're starting to monitor Generation Alpha. So they're the youngest of the generations. And yes, they might be a bit too young right now, because a lot of influence might be coming from their millennial parents. Or their Gen Z siblings. But I think they will be the next generation for us and brands who are going to be influential when it comes to, so the oldest are in their young teens. So they will be pretty influential when it comes to how they are adopting technology, what their engagement is like when it comes to brands. So yeah, I think there's quite a few interesting things when it comes to the younger generation.
Well, they should be also the ones who would interact sooner or later with brands in the metaverse. Let's go back to it. Of course, the metaverse has created a lot of interest and conversation in the tech companies community, also in the marketing industry, with advertisers and brands and so on. There's a lot of things going on there, and there's a lot of interest. But what about the man and woman in the street? Do you think that normal people, let's call it that way, are interested, are curiosity about it, or they see it as a very strange thing that doesn't have to do anything with them?
Yeah, so quite often when I talk about the metaverse, I see it more as an evolution of technology. So if you are a digitally engaged person, if you have some sort of presence online, then yes, the metaverse is going to affect you and it's going to impact you. And it's the same for individuals, it's the same for brands. So when brands are asking me whether it's something they need to be worried about right now, if you have a digital presence, then yes, it is something to worry about right now, or at least be aware of right now. And it's the evolution of where technology is heading. And if you want to be on the forefront of that when it comes to utilizing different tools for socializing, different games you want to be playing, different platforms you want to be considering for a business that you might be wanting to flourish and expand, then the metaverse is offering a new channel and outlet for that. So I definitely think there's a lot of opportunity in the metaverse for people, and even for the average person. I would say yes, it's important, because the way we have picked up technology over the last 2-3 years, it's really accelerated our relationship with technology. And because of that, we are far more receptive to adopting new forms of technology, and we're a bit more open to that. And even our phones, most of our phones already has augmented reality capabilities in there. So it's not actually a far step for us to actually be going around and using that type of technology in our day-to-day living.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Keeping on with the metaverse for one more question, and is that you're a designer, at least by education, and well, how do you see the metaverse through the lens of a designer? Because for me, and I cannot pretend to be an expert at all, but it doesn't look either very comfortable nor very beautiful for the moment. How do you see it?
Yes, I'm a graphic designer by trade and have been in the industry for a number of years. And I think this is a really exciting space for creatives. Basically, you're able to really stretch your imagination and go beyond any physical, real world confines. And you're able to think beyond, something static. It can be something that's constantly moving and evolving. And I think this is going to create a whole new opportunity for creatives. When it comes to creative outlets, from a visual perspective, perhaps there's a lot of mix match stuff going on right now. And this is even the same when it came to the early days of the internet. The early days of the internet wasn't designed by a designer. It was designed by technologists. So now we're in an age where we're moving into the metaverse. Creators are having a say in one area. Technologists are having a say. Engineers are having a say. Marketers are having a say. So lots of people are coming from different angles and participating and creating the metaverse. Even law firms and financial advisors are having their input in the metaverse. But for me, again, from our analysis of the metaverse, the visuals is something that's driving the metaverse right now, or at least at the forefront of a lot of conversation. But how does the metaverse sound? How should you be experiencing the metaverse the moment you are on that platform or you're entering a virtual world? These are elements that I think add to the experience that goes beyond just how a space or a virtual world or an outlet looks like. So again, how do you create the best maximum experience by dialing into as many sensory needs as possible? Yeah, I think the brands that we're working with are already thinking about these elements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go back to trends and let's talk a little bit, if you want, about something that I think is more than a trend. It's a cultural reality that is political correctness that is having an enormous influence in many fields of our life. But how do you see it? Do you think there will be a kind of counter reaction? How it will evolve? What influence it will have, and in which ways it will move forward in the future?
So my understanding of your question is just political correctness and where we are at with it now and where it will head.
Yeah, if there will be a big movement against or not, or do we will learn to live with it normally, or what are your feelings and your ideas about it?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to political correctness, where we are right now is we're still trying to establish the new rule book for the workplace, for everyday life, for our friends, for our families. What types of glossary or language should we be using amongst different places? Is there a universal one that which we should be abiding by? So we're trying to establish new etiquette, and I think at the moment we're questioning everything, and rightly so, because it seems like the pandemic has almost turned everything on its head, and so we're starting to be more inquisitive and thoughtful about every element that's happening. And if these next few years are all about big change, then let's turn every stone. Let's make sure we question every single thing before we settle on something. And I think this is where we're at from a sort of mass cultural perspective and level. But it won't be like this forever, because it's not nice feeling like you can't say anything or being too cautious, and especially there's a big backlash when it comes to creatives and authors saying, a big part of their job is to put themselves in the shoes of someone completely different, not themselves, and to write fiction. But if they're being banned from doing that because of cultural appropriation or whatever it might be, that is limiting their creativity. So we also need to think, how does all of these shifts that are happening and these things that we're questioning, how will it impact creativity, certain jobs, and how will it impact certain communities and individuals and so on and so forth? And is it limiting the way we are pushing more natural innovation that happens? So, for example, a lot of cuisine that are fusion cuisines, they didn't come about just because we kept it local. It came about because there was a mix mash and experimentation. So we don't want to limit these types of things, but at the same time, we don't want to be appropriating things inappropriately. So we're just at a tension point, which will probably last for a little bit more time, but it will settle, and we will kind of go back to a place where we will still be questioning different things, but we just need to utilize this opportunity. And there was something that a journalist, Cara Swisher, said, and she says, it's better to be woke than asleep. So I quite like that way of thinking of you far rather right now to be questioning all of these things than to just be asleep and be not participating in this conversation. So I think, there's something quite true to what she says with that. And I think this is where we are from a societal perspective, and this is how we want to push the agenda. So let it be, but not for too long, because we don't want to, again, as we say, limit creativity.
Okay, thank you very much. Sounds very interesting. Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about you for a moment, okay? As you mentioned earlier, you studied design. You're a designer. Why did you feel attracted by design to start with?
So I was always attracted to language and design. So those were the two areas that definitely naturally attracted me when it came to studying. And I ended up choosing graphic design because it was, for me, all about communication. How can you best communicate an idea, a story, a message in the best way as possible through whatever medium or channel, whether it's using words, whether it's using film, whether it's using an in-person activation or space? How can you best convey a message or something to the audience? And that for me was really interesting, and I felt graphic design was able to offer that opportunity for me to explore this area. And I think naturally I fell into publications and working for publications because of this. And again, naturally I segued into working for trend forecasting, because again, it was all about, it went beyond communication. It went into the understanding, what do you want to be communicating? So really drilling into the message, and that's from working with a lot of journalists helped me navigate into this sector and this area that I'm working in now. And I think ultimately what I realize I enjoy the most is understanding human behavior without doing a psychology degree.
Yeah.
But being able to get into the minds of different people, different markets, and why people are doing certain things. And then connecting that to a broader message for companies that we're working with, and helping inform them. So yeah, that's kind of like my a little bit about my career path.
Okay. Well, as you have just mentioned, you have worked in magazines, in the editorial companies, in Icon magazine, and in Monaco, which is of course a very very famous company and brand. Well, what did you learn there? How did you enjoy that? What was how was the experience of working there?
So working in an editorial company has helped me understand how we should be thinking to uncover new and different types of stories, and from a perspective that's unique. Because as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people are publishing and talking and having their opinions and expressing things. There's a lot of content out there already. So what makes these publications, or what makes these articles or features that we're publishing more interesting than others? And it's the unique perspective that we're offering. So the way we're analyzing and talking about it, the way we're unpacking it, and the way we're able to get first person interviews and quotes. So a lot of people are probably rehashing press releases or things that are already out there. But for us, it is very important, especially in our larger macro reports, to speak to experts that in the field that we're covering, because we're not experts until we speak to them. And getting that first person perspective and getting a variety of first person perspectives is important for us. And it's not just about different experts and their way of thinking. How do you bring in different elements to shape the story in a more unique way? So maybe data, finding different examples that are out there, and then adding your own personal flair as well. So it's helped me gather the different ingredients of creating what a trend report in the future would look like.
Mm. That sounds like good journalism to me.
Yeah.
It's quite similar. This is the kind of work you're doing.
Exactly the same. I mean, I say, we are trend forecasters, but the way we approach it is very journalistic. And that's the way I've learned about it, of reporting. And that's how I continue it in the work that I do.
Mm. Well, you entered the trends or the futures activity by getting into the future laboratory. Well, how did it came about? How did you jump from the editorial to the futures?
Yeah, so this is actually not that glamorous a story. I think I just got very lucky. So I was approached by a recruiter who told me about the job, and they approached me for the job, and I went for it, and I ended up getting the job. But it was interesting because they also gave an assignment, which I felt was great because it gives you an idea of how someone thinks and how they go about unpacking a story. So I can't really remember the assignment exactly, but it was trying to look for visual trends and what are the visual trends that I'm seeing out there. So I was able to look through a more architectural and design lens because Icon was focused on that, and curate a selection of visual trends that I spotted. And again, I have to really give a lot of credit to Martin Raymond, who's one of the co-founders of the Future Laboratory. It's just basically he gave me a chance because I think in the beginning, learning about trends is not as easy as you think it is. It takes a lot of time. And it looks a lot easier when you see people reporting trends. And then when it comes to doing it, it's a whole other beast. But so I would definitely give credit to Martin Raymond for giving me the opportunity and spending time with me to nurture me, to fully understand, the world of trends and how we can leverage it, not just for brands but in life as well for individuals.
Okay. Well, the most fascinating part of your CV for me was your sabbatical. I think that's great. And there's some beautiful parts about it, that is spending and living in the Gobi Desert for several days and doing the Trans-Siberian train and so on. Well, what did you felt it was good for you to do a sabbatical, and what did you learn about it? Or what did you look for? What did you look for, and what did you find?
Yeah. So the sabbatical was something that I really learned a lot from, but probably whilst I was on my sabbatical, I didn't think I was learning. It's something that over the years you think back and you think how it's impacted you. It does always go back to that. And I would say prior to that, I was a workaholic. I worked around the clock. And even in the evenings, I would go to events that were connected to work. I would invite my friends to go there because I didn't have time to see them. So they would have to come to these work events with me. So I was working around the clock, and I really was so dedicated to work that it was actually quite hard for me to think about not working for 1 year. So even whilst I was planning my sabbatical, I was also seeing if I could be taking on some freelance work. So I was like, it was going to be so strange to not work. But actually, the moment I stopped working, it was very easy. And it definitely opened up my eyes in terms of, fulfilling the sense of curiosity that a lot of people may have with what's out there. It's definitely very different to just taking time out, like 2 or 3 weeks out of your schedule per year. You're doing something that's very concentrated. Your everyday life is focused on where you're going that day, what will you be doing, what will you be seeing. It operates a different part of your brain. And you're able to experience all this different language, culture, food, architecture, design. You're able to be exposed to all of this one after the other. So I think there's something very mind-opening about that. It makes you more receptive to different things out there and more appreciative of people and humanity. So I was very lucky. I had a very smooth 1 year journey, and it was very, I was able to experience lots of different things as well, and meet with different people from around the world too. And in terms of a life experience, I'm very lucky in my job. I'm able to travel quite a lot, but I don't have a lot of that. I don't have the feeling that people may have of, I really can't wait to travel here, or I have this on my bucket list, or I must see this before, I die. I don't have that because I traveled for a year, and I feel like it satisfied quite a lot of my travel needs. Of course, I still go on holiday, and of course, I still travel, but I don't have that same feeling as a lot of people might have. Because I was able to carve time out to do this, and it's invaluable. It's definitely once in a lifetime. I don't never say never, but I'm not sure if I will take a year out of my working schedule again to do something like this. But I had the energy, I had the sort of curiosity to do it when I did do it, and it's definitely a life experience that money can't buy. So I think I would highly recommend it for many. Maybe you don't need to go for a year. 6 months is great as well. And it's just it definitely is something that stays with you for a very long time. So invaluable.
Okay, thank you for your words, Emma. It's been lovely to hear you to talk about that. Well, and just to finish, I don't want to take more of your time. You'll be very gentle and kind with us. And the last question, which is one we pose to every one of our interviewees, and is we are asking for a recommendation for a reading or a viewing recommendation, whether it's a book, film, series, whatever, something that you have liked that you would like to share with our readers and viewers. No need to be something professional, something that you have simply enjoyed.
So something I have been doing over the pandemic and have continued is to, when possible, go for a morning walk. And whilst I go for my morning walk, I listen to a podcast. And one that I love listening to is called Hidden Brain. And it's a podcast where they interview different psychologists on different topics, and it's all connected to human behavior. So yes, there is a little bit that's connected to my work, but it's slightly different because they analyze it from a scientific perspective. And it is very exciting for me because it does further help enhance me in understanding why people behave the way they do, but from a scientific perspective, and not so timely. It's not necessarily linked to time, which a lot of my job is. Linked to what's happening right now. So I really enjoy that because it feels very fulfilling in learning more about people and the different dimensions of what makes us human ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And listening to you, just let me be unpolite and ask one more thing that has come to my mind listening to you now. Are you able to, when you're in your leisure time with friends, family, whatever, are you able to switch off, or or do you analyze them? Do you analyze their behaviors through the eyes of the trend things of the global director of WT Intelligence?
Yeah, so obviously I don't tell them I'm analyzing them. No, of course I get to switch off. But I do, I mean, it's so intertwined, like what I do work-wise and, what I can be doing in my leisure time. So for example, when it comes to choosing restaurants, I might be the one choosing the restaurant because we may have covered it, or it might be something new that's happening and I saw it because I'm obviously focusing on what's happening right now. So it is intertwined, and which is why I feel I'm in a very fortunate place where I'm in a job that I love, and when I wake up to and I actually enjoy what I do on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, of course I get to switch off. So I actually have a lot of friends who work in completely different fields, which then makes us unable to talk about what we do. So I have friends who are scientists working in IT, working in human resources, and when we get together, we don't talk about work, or if we do talk about different things about work. So it's not the actual work itself. So I think when you're surrounded by people who are in completely different fields and areas, it really helps. But also being able to plug into different things, so switching off and watching TV or whatever it might be, and books. I read a lot of fiction, but actually at the moment I'm reading a lot of psychology books, but that's also another way to kind of switch off from my day-to-day work life.
Okay, Emma, thanks a million indeed. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, actually. It's been a privilege, and I hope you have enjoyed your time talking with me.
Absolutely, and apologies for the noise earlier.
No problem. That's right.